Ngarachu is an economic researcher at the Tutwa Consulting Group. Anna, good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time once again on Newsfeed. The basic income grant is one thing, but I think what most people would probably want is jobs, simply because they pay a lot more than any basic income grant could. If you look at the top 5 countries in terms of youth unemployment, many of them are in the Southern African region. It's not just us. It's Eswatini, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Namibia. There's a regional problem here.
Thank you so much, Stephen. You're right about that. There is an issue that needs to be considered. I think the call for a basic income grant comes as maybe an immediate fix, but it's not a sufficient solution, which I completely agree. If you look at some of the countries, especially South Africa or Southern African countries, what we see is they actually suffer from what is called the jobless growth syndrome, which means that regardless of how much growth there is, as an increase in GDP, that doesn't actually translate to the number of jobs created. And this is really largely attributed to a lot of the structural and legacy issues Southern African countries have faced. And the reality is it is wiser to focus on structural reforms, not just focus on a basic income grant because of the issue of sustainability. Because when you focus on these structural reforms, what you're actually doing is allowing a more sustainable foundation for the creation of jobs and business opportunities alike. And I think that's where there's another passionate plea to focus more on structural reforms and not really just the basic income grant.
We've been talking about structural reforms in our economy. Well, I'm a young man, so I'll say at least 15 years. I don't know if this is the right crisis for some kind of change or if nothing's going to happen. Frankly, I think some people are beginning to lose a bit of hope around our economy.
Yeah, naturally, people are losing hope, and I think that's why there's that plea again for more immediate solutions, such as the basic income grant. But I think it's more about, it's a long waiting game we have to play. We can't lose hope at the end of the story, if that makes sense. Yes, structural reforms have been tabled for quite some time, and the main issues, for example, are skills in terms of the education system. These are very long strategies. They don't have immediate solutions. So I don't think it's about losing hope. It's more about just keep working towards this goal. And because it feels like a moving target, people can lose hope. But I definitely think there are, shall we say, we can see solutions towards the end of this.
There's also the idea, and this has been debated for some time, Kasati's been pushing for this very hard, that people would be allowed to access part of their pension. It would be a sort of once-off move. The idea, as I understand it, this would allow you to pay off your house. You would pay less interest charges, so you'd pay back debt earlier and things like that. Now, I mean, this could obviously help many people. The risk is that by the time you get to pensionable age, you can't work anymore. You find that you have no income. There really are pros and cons to this. It's a very interesting, complex proposal that could have severe consequences.
You're definitely right. I think it's more about accessing your retirement funding responsibly. I think the minister mentioned it at the briefing this afternoon that this is still being tabled and still being discussed. So, but they are pushing to see how this can afford people relief, because that's what people need at the moment is relief. But at the end of the day, as an individual, you need to decide how responsible you are with using that money. So it is an idea, but I think it's up to every individual to decide whether that is economically viable for themselves.
Sometimes we spend a lot of time talking about economic theory. We want that reform, we want this reform, we all want a basic income grant, whatever it is. But sometimes the nuts and bolts stuff maybe gets lost. And I'm talking about the fact that last week we had stage 2 load shedding. You really can't have a growing economy without electricity. Transnet, I mean, amazingly, I don't know if they've admitted it yet, but we all know that their computer systems were hacked. And so if you're a citrus farmer, you couldn't move your product out of the country. Imagine platinum during a commodity super cycle, not being able to move your stuff out of the country. Sometimes it's just about getting the stuff that we're doing right.
You're exactly right. I think it's about improving the doing business environment, and we have had an energy crisis for quite some time. So I mean, Stephen, if I knew all the answers, I'd be tabling it with you at the moment. But I think there's so many moving targets that government needs to work on. And for individuals, for traders, for companies, it's really about just making the doing business environment a little bit more feasible to get things off the ground. And we can't expect them to do everything. In my opinion, I think they have a lot to juggle. And I do think we have some capable leaders in place. But as you rightly say, it's a difficult environment to be in. And we're doing the best we can.
And do you have any optimism that what might happen? I've seen some economists. Now, economists famously aren't always very optimistic. They're always predicting recession. Sometimes they're right. But do you agree with some people that after the pandemic, and we see the United States economy, for example, sort of roaring back to life, do you think there might be a sort of global economic boost which might help us?
Well, what we're seeing, or what I expect and what I understand, is we're only going to get to, shall we say, pre-COVID levels in about 2023. So I wouldn't be pushing for a boost, but I think that it's, with how everything's moving, we definitely expect some more, shall we say, upswings in not only our economy, but globally. So there is a bit of optimism, but I wouldn't, I think the interests have really cut down on some of the growth projections that we saw. So I think it's about taking, both sides of the coin. There's that negativity, but definitely there's room for opportunities.
And Ngarachu, thank you. Economic research at the Tutwa Consulting Group. Really do appreciate the time this afternoon.